Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
So we're
It's minutes though.
That's fair.
yeah. All right, Reagan, we're here. What do we got? Tell me what's going on. Why is there all these voices?
Well, you texted me and we said we should just podcast right this.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry.
I thought you'd be in bed by 8:45, but you're still awake.
I know.
The house is full.
The house is full.
It's been quite the busy couple of days, as you know. And we're Tuesday night recording this, and it's literally almost 9 o'clock, which is close to my normal bedtime. However, I've been making it up to like 10, almost even 11 Sunday night. That was insane.
Occasion.
Yeah, it was only because Rep. McIntire was in town early. So here we are. I got on my right my wife, Representative Vikki Breese Iverson. On my left, Representative Emily McIntire.
And he passed the first test because he could remember his right from his left.
Well,
And
on
on my left,
Congratulations.
former state senator Tim Knopp, also my dad.
Good to be here.
No,
yeah,
don't want
great
know.
to have you. All right. I was telling some people today, some lobbyists, some other staffers, I said this morning, I love this time of session more so just working in a staff office because literally there's no responsibility. Like you get to just hang out and just eat popcorn and watch shit fly for the slack.
We do not do
You
that in the
actually
Representative
said-
Breese Iverson office.
Watch it fly. And really, I want to know not so much about this man over here on my left, but Reagan, my chief of staff, do you sit and watch what's going on while eating popcorn? I'm just
We have popped some popcorn while we're trying to finish the Ways and Means brief
oh.
or some other very important task that we're in the
Well, now I understand the stains on the brief that I get. Thank you.
Yeah.
I should probably print a fresh copy, huh?
But my point is it's way different versus, being in the caucus office versus being in a staff office.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just as intense, but just the level of work is different because
any email, you don't have big committees.
yeah, but the
It's
caucus
totally
office, like I remember 2 years ago, we were hammered trying to get things finished and out the door. And landing the plane, this is my question, Senator. Landing the plane is difficult. And I think, of course, walking out kind of helped land the plane a little more because coming back, we had a little bit more who's going to be in the seats. But could you speak to like how difficult, you've been here a long time, you were in the building a long time, like how difficult really is it landing the plane and how chaotic is kind of your thought process on that? Just in a general session like I think we're at.
And include
Well-
all the turbulence and how many seats change and where the seatbelts are located and the life-saving devices, please.
Yeah.
Yes, well, I've been on multiple planes lately, and what's really important is to have good leadership, otherwise known as pilots. Because if you don't have good leadership and good pilots
Good
to bring this
analogy.
thing home, it's gonna be a disaster. And they make movies about these types of disasters. What we don't want to have happen is a legislative disaster where the legislature ends up passing a massive tax increase because people can't stick together and represent the public as opposed to special interest groups that just want more money. So I think it's going to be tough because the majority Democrats want massive tax increases and Republicans generally don't, and neither does the public. But the efforts that they're trying to do to revive this transportation package, I think, is going to extend the session out probably longer than otherwise it needed to be. Like, I think you guys could have been done already, but for the fact that they're still trying to take this, let's just call it turbulent legislation, and try to pass it in a smooth way. And is not happening. So kudos to those who are standing up on both sides of the aisle to say no to this tax increase.
Yeah, I hear that. I think, well, nice segue into the transportation. So we want to hit the 5 things you didn't know that's happened the last 2 days, because it's been a pretty jam-packed 2 days. And I think it's going to be an incredible few more days. And I think what you got to is a good point. Is so Friday there was a fight in joint transportation, which dragged into Ways and Means not getting done till 7:30 or something. There ended up being a fight between, not a fight, I would say Representative Bosar Davis made a very, and she's been very, I would say, against this bill from the get-go, is a fair way of putting it. And the boiling point has been moving up higher and higher and higher in this committee. So on top of all that, you had the nuances of Meek being moved off of the committee, Rob Wagner moving himself onto the committee, all those sort of things, and we moved to final comments. Rep. Bosar Davis made some choice words that I don't think were that bad, to be honest. I mean, to be fair.
It was pretty normal Republican rhetoric.
Yeah,
We're the people. We oppose the big taxes. There's no accountability in this bill. I think all of which were fairly accurate.
Not just that, but let's really go back and look at that video. And by the way, those of us in Ways and Means that were paused in Ways and Means, we're watching the transportation conversation happen. And
yeah, it's like you guys had turned on the Super Bowl in there. You guys were just watching.
Reagan, it was a little bit like that. But the words that Representative Bosshart Davis used were the exact words that the other side, I believe maybe Gamba had used.
He said what Gamba said.
Representative Gamba.
And Representative Helfrich said he said the same thing and didn't get the same reaction. So
in all of that, I would suggest maybe there was a little bit, and maybe it was just the ongoing of the evening and it was running late and everybody was getting a little tired of hearing it. But at the same time, it's not okay to unleash it on the co-chair of that particular transportation committee that also happens to be a woman and not on the 3 previous people and 2 men that were part of it.
So to jump ahead, you jumped ahead in yours. So her comments, we all agree, were normal Republican rhetoric. I think it's probably a fair way to put it, especially compared to this transportation package. So Senator Gorsuch from Gresham decides to, in the words used by Representative Bosar Davis, lunge forward and basically repudiate her and yell at her and say, "You've had your chance." And he was kind of saying that she was impugning him and all the things. I don't know, regardless of all that.
He flat said she was impugning him.
Everybody on the dais is what he said. So regardless of all that, so craziness happens over the weekend, all the things, she takes offense to it, files or quote unquote says she's going to file Rule 27 based on his being the co-chair. All that happens over the weekend. Come Monday, 2025 goes to the floor.
House Bill 2025, just for anybody who is not tracking this closely.
A $15 billion House bill going to the floor. Democrats realize they don't have the votes to pass it. They send it back to the Transportation Committee, and that is where it sits today. And we have not had a meeting on Monday or Tuesday of that Joint Transportation Committee since then, except for now Gorsuch has resigned, and Rob Wagner removed himself, who put himself on the committee, removed himself from the committee, and put poor Manning and Lou Frederick on the committee in his stead, and then moved Senator Pham as co-chair. So these are all 3 of these people are literally part of the progressive caucus that pushed for, Reagan, you remember how much their progressive transportation package was? $22 billion?
I think it was 22 billion, Brian.
I want to say it was a lot. So now they're co-chairs. So now they're doubling down. And I think that's where things sit as of now.
And I would imagine the phone calls and the text messages were flying furiously Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then of course during the week. But it seems like there's a lot of dialing. I think I saw an article mentioning that the speaker and the Senate president, everybody's making calls trying to hold this thing. I don't know if you can even say hold it together, but put together a new package quickly, right? That could garner enough votes to pass. And remember, they have to hit 36 and 18. I think the 18 isn't quite as hard as the 36 seems to be right now, because there's a squadron of moderate House Democrats that are really, really frustrated right now. And I think that's a pretty good sized group. And they are, I would say, in the driver's seat.
And
Here's-
also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sen.
No, Brian, I mean, here's what I would say is that my Representative Emerson Levy, would be wise to not support this massive tax increase, because I can tell you, Oregonians don't want more money taken out of their paycheck for mass transit. They don't want to pay a significant amount more in Oregon's gas tax, and all the fees that are attached to this bill that added up to $15 billion over a 10-year period. That is, I believe, the largest tax increase in Oregon history. And I think those who vote for this will not be seen kindly by Oregonians who are out there working hard just to put food on the table and pay their rent or their house payment.
I could not agree more. And then I would layer on top of that, when they let him speak on Friday, which was interesting.
So not a member of the committee, but speaking from the dais.
Yeah.
He
And
wouldn't
there
move.
was-
Not on a committee. Yes, you're correct, Reagan. He was not actually on the committee
Yeah.
while he was speaking
Yeah.
and sitting at the dais, but they didn't physically remove him. So there's
which was also
it,
pretty interesting to have him there.
for that moment where you
Well-
wanted some popcorn to just sit there and
Yeah.
watch and eat.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't see what the good Senator Meek said, but he's the chair. If people don't understand this, he's the chair of the Revenue Committee, and it doesn't sound like he's in favor of what's going on.
Of the revenue.
Of raising revenue,
No.
which I think is interesting. So you got Gorsuch, who resigned as the chair of the committee, and of course Wagner, who quit the committee so he could put other people on there. This is more than turbulence. This is a not only a turbulence, but it's a train wreck.
And Senator Meek was very clear that he's not for this bill and he's not voting for this bill. And it's in that form. So to your point of 18, now you're at 17. Because they're only at 18. So on the Democrat side. So even if somehow they end, mind you, the transportation package, because it raises revenue, has to come out of the House first. So you got to clear some massive hurdles. And I don't know, have you heard anything, Representative McIntire, about like where transportation is even at? What's the scuttlebutt in the halls? Are you hearing?
I know the Mod Ds don't like it, but hearing that there is potentially a dead bill that's now been resurrected, I don't know where they're at with the new whatever it is that they've currently done to it. But prior to today, I don't think they had the votes for it.
What have
Well,
you?
that
I mean, we've heard the same thing.
Yeah.
We're hearing that there's a significant amount of those mod deeds. That might include your representative, Senator Knopp, that really don't appreciate the amount of additional tax, transfer fees, other fine and registration costs that are mounted into this new transportation package. And we did hear, I think there was a little bit of a rumor today that there was a slimmed down, maybe we call it the Weight Watchers version of a transportation.
The Wachovia version?
I mean,
No, it's
Ozempic transportation package.
it's all the things. But I whatever this Weight Watcher version of the transportation package, I think it only trimmed down 5 billion. I mean, which sounds like a lot, but when you're talking 15 to 10, seems like a small haircut.
It's the Weight Mile Watchers version. We go. For our trucker friends.
Mile Watchers.
The 5 people who will get that joke.
We don't like Oprah. She's a liberal, like Weight Watchers. We don't give
But
it's normal.
here's the
Right?
thing,
When you say
Brian, real quick on this too. What's interesting is they ran. So one of our next topics is the Christmas tree bill, and that's usually where if you're going to do some last minute shenanigans, you're going to jam it in there. Well, they already ran that out of CapCon and Ways and Means. So now, if you're trying to buy somebody off, you're only going to be able to buy them off on transportation. You can't use anything else because there's no mechanism without sending that bill back into committee, which will freak out the rest of the legislature. So they've really closed the opportunities that they have available on leverage too, which is I just find super interesting.
I think it's pretty clear that even though leadership is still trying on the Democrat side to bring this forward with enough votes, I mean, the signals to me are that they're willing to let this dive just for the reasons that Reagan said, is they have taken all the tools out of their hands really to close this session out and find the votes that they need to find. And, unfortunately, Oregonians would probably be appalled, but basically, in order to pass some of this stuff that is objectionable, they have to enhance something for someone's district enough to the point where they're willing to vote for something they don't want to vote for. And I don't think the votes are there for this package or for even a bigger package. So I think they're probably just saying they're willing to come back in the short session to try this again. Because the clock's running out.
Short session, special session. I mean,
Yeah.
all those things are in front of us, are they not?
Right.
In 2017, Senator, you could speak to this. So because that was layered with projects. And so they were able to, I mean, I hate to use the word buy votes, but basically get people to have take-home projects, right? That they could say, oh, we're getting this bridge that we've always wanted, or this road to nowhere, Lapine. All these things that they could dangle, but they don't have any of those things in this package. So to your whole point, there's nothing really to kind of try to find votes somewhere.
Well, not only do they not have those in this package, but their track record is horrible because they haven't even finished in 8 years. They haven't finished the projects that they said they were going to do in the other package.
Well, wait, Senator,
And they said they're out of money.
They kind of finished the one in Prineville finally, and it only was like haircutted by so much that we got the sidewalk ADA things, but not the repavement through town. So now we just bump our way through town because it's so cut up and repaved and cut up and repaved that you can't carry on a conversation without somebody think you're like
Really
cutting
bad.
out.
Oregon's going to end up like Pawnee from Parks and Recreation.
That if you just play the Parks and Rec theme song over all of the hijinks that is happening right now, it makes sense. So, in contrast, Brian, to transportation, wildfire funding is something that didn't go quite as poorly. It actually went a lot better than I think a lot of people had considered. There were still the political bumps in the road, but at the beginning of the session, there was definitely one senator who was heavily motivated to repeal the wildfire maps that he may have drawn with crayon. And that's Senator Jeff Golden hailing from Ashland. So he was pretty motivated to get that done because the reputation and the damage from these maps has just been really significant. So there was really strong bipartisan agreement to do that. The Democrats did what they do best and let the Republicans write the bill and then copied our idea. So a little bit, it's kind of like AI for the legislature, and Republicans are Chat GPT, and then the Democrats are going to take what we're using, what we write for them. So they put that in Senate Bill 83, a good bill, very well written, good bill from some of our friends that we know. We had Dave Honeycutt on the podcast. He helped a ton, and Samantha Bear from Property Owners. They did a ton of work on that bill to correctly repeal the maps because there's a lot of statute that references those maps. So it's a complicated repeal. So that moved forward. And then it got diverted, we'll say, to rules on the House side for a bit while we had some negotiate on wildfire funding. And so we have two representatives here who can probably tell us a little bit about that. So I don't know which one of you guys, wants to share more on the details on that. But what did the wildfire funding conversation look like?
Wildfire funding, or would you go with 83? Because it's two different bills.
Definitely.
But they were tied together. Basically, politically, their fate was locked up together, right? One wasn't going to be allowed to move without the other, was my understanding.
Can I say how much I appreciated that we pulled a bill out of committee and ran it across the House floor?
And not only that, but a certain representative that may be in Senator Knopp's
That may
district,
represent
yes,
Senator Knopp. got to
made
pull that
that
one forward.
poll. So very, very cool.
So Emerson Levy was able to take Senate Bill 83 yesterday, and you can at any time on the House floor, you can basically make a motion during props and motions to pull any bill really to the floor for a vote. And it's so that it takes two votes. One, a vote to pull it to the floor, so you have to vote yes to pull it to the floor, and then you can move the bill, right? Then it goes, and if that happens, then it moves into second readings.
Correct.
So what happened was Emerson Levy, Democrat from Redmond Bend, stands up, pulls Senate Bill 83, and everybody, and of course Republicans want that, and enough Democrats wanted it, and lo and behold, it's the one few times it's ever actually worked where you actually pull the bill to the floor.
Isn't it amazing that when, I mean, I don't know, what was it, Representative McIntire? 3 weeks we've been trying to pull that bill to committee and push it across the
And
House.
Representative Levy has been very upset about it. Yeah.
But she pulls it to the
She
floor, and by golly, it swims across that House floor in a bipartisan approach without one. Maybe there was one.
Listen, I
Was there
don't
one?
care how it happened. I'm happy it happened.
If there was
and
one, there was only one, and it was about very outline no vote. But the rest of, and it was not a Republican, but all the rest of them voted for that bill to go across the floor.
Great.
and
great.
whether they wanted
Great.
it or not.
Okay, so there was maybe one or two.
No, I'm telling you, it is. We're very
It's
on
the
the
precedent that they now will vote on bill polls.
Yeah.
Also, not that they
Yes.
care, but it does.
100%. It
So, yeah, we pulled it to the floor on May 29th, June 2nd, June 17th, June 18th, June 19th, and then finally passed it June 23rd. The one no was Representative Chaichi. And I honestly,
okay.
I don't even think she's not allowed to debate, so we don't even know why it was a no. And then she didn't vote no on the final bill either.
Oh, probably
Representative Rayburn.
probably the procedure. I bet that's why.
What was the final vote on the final bill?
50-0 with 8 excused.
Oh, okay, great. So that was a great maneuver. It was kind of fun to see it happen. It's great for Oregon. It just needs to happen. I mean, it was just one of those things that everybody knows these wildfire maps was a bad intention, a bad bill, a bad outcome, and it needed to go away, which is very rare for Democrats, to be honest, to actually repeal something that they put in the statute.
I don't know.
Well, because when they were passed, we were told that the wildfire maps were not going to lead to exactly what they led to.
Yeah.
And so it became obvious to not only Republican legislators that we had been lied to, but the public had been lied to as well. And in order to have a shred of credibility, the Democrats had to provide some votes to get rid of the wildfire maps. So I agree with you, Brian. It's not very often that they admit they made a mistake, but they clearly did. And it would be great if they could admit a few more mistakes.
Can we
you
do
know,
that? I have a few.
like providing, like telling us that funding healthcare for illegal aliens would only cost 100 to 150 million, and it turns out costs like $1 billion, 900 something million dollars, and we're not going to be able to afford that long term. So the Democrats are going to have to come to grips with the fact that other Democrat states are getting rid of these healthcare programs for people who are in the country illegally, and they are completely unaffordable. And we should be focusing on funding things like domestic violence, funding, and funding for veterans, and funding for single mothers who need housing for them and their kids. And there's just lots of things that we could do for Oregonians and for our citizens, and they're failing to do it because of policy choices that they've made that have been again, significant train wrecks.
Even in the face of other, I would say, very left, California, Minnesota, states that are cutting illegal alien healthcare, at least for adults, they're cutting it, and yet we're sticking to our guns here in the wake of quote unquote a budget crisis, and which I don't think we have. We don't have a revenue problem. So the other thing that came along with wildfire, just to wrap up wildfire, and we can move on, is the funding side of it is 39 House Bill 3940. So that basically what they did is they came up with a package that took 20% of the rainy day fund and dedicated it to
Rainy day
wildfire.
fund, just the interest off
Interest, yeah, the interest from the rainy day
Make sure you
fund,
get it right.
which is kind of a cool idea. It was Representative Greg Smith's idea originally. Came up with it. Neat idea to actually say, hey, what are we doing with the interest? Because normally that just gets swept back into the general fund. So that was a good idea. And then the
And can I explain why that's a really good idea?
Sure.
Because the rainy day fund is intended for when Oregon has an issue that it doesn't normally have in a regular budget year. The things that we can't always anticipate, and it's kind of an emergency of sorts, right? It's a crisis of something, and to use the interest off of that rainy day fund for something that we didn't expect, i.e., wildfire suppression and costs of putting them out. Heaven forbid we stop them in the first place. But that whole idea that we're using the interest off of that rainy day fund that is intended for something that we don't anticipate is actually exactly what this is used for. I think it's a good scenario, not to be misappropriated or used into the future, but for an emergency that Oregon is experiencing. Let me be clear.
So, and the other funding in that isn't intended for wildfire on any level whatsoever. But I'd imagine a lot of firefighters, use it. We decided it was good to put a Zen tax into the wildfire funding. So if people that use nicotine patches basically are now paying 65 cents or will pay 65 cents a can and that's dedicated to wildfire funding. And this is an industry negotiated acceptable offer is the best I can put it. As long as it was dedicated to wildfire, which is good. And so then they did that with a companion bill through Ways and Means and the CapCon that also dedicated another 190 million dollars, something like that. So really we have wildfire funded. And so all this stuff kind of moved forward, and they both have passed the House and now they're on to the Senate.
Now, one thing I think that's interesting during that revenue discussion about nicotine is all of the healthcare folks showed up and they were like, we oppose the nicotine tax. But it was because they were like, hey, if we're going to tax stuff that's bad for you, like tobacco and whatever, because this was getting inserted into, it's not tobacco, it's nicotine, but it's anything that's kind of in this addictive substance. They're like, hey, that's our money. We want to use that for healthcare. And so they showed up and they kind of complained that we're stopping the wildfire folks, and the wildfire funding conversation sort of stomped on their turf. So there's a little bit of a turf war. Wildfire funding did beat healthcare funding on this round. I thought that was interesting.
Yes, healthcare funding has plenty of money, as I think Senator Knopp just alluded to, in regards to if they want more money, there's a $900 million sitting in there for illegal alien.
Well, I would suggest who says that money, as it relates to wildfire suppression, isn't healthcare, because the kind of smoke, like literally some years, I literally have to leave Central Oregon just so I can breathe. And I mean, there was a year that I went about 500 miles because there were fires in so many directions. I ended up in near Yellowstone Park because that was the clearest air that I could find. And it affects a lot of people's health in terms of the wildfire smoke that comes from these incredible and damaging fires. So, I think they missed the boat on that one. And it actually is an element of healthy air and healthcare there.
He traveled to another state, and that wasn't even during a walkout.
Thank you, Reagan, because I was just asking Brian that question.
For the walkout, I didn't go to Yellowstone. I went to Glacier. So
Just for clarifying.
Still nice clean air up there. I mean, there was
absolutely, I enjoyed Montana a lot.
Do you think
Back to your point, I mean, we really do need to talk about all of the money that we spend in healthcare, all of the money we spend, and put all these line item budgets into, these line items into the budgets. All the state agencies have to talk about climate change and how we decarbonize their whatever footprint of their budget. Isn't that part of this? Shouldn't they all kind of contribute into what it is we're trying to do with this wildfire scenario? And by that, I do mean maybe we should talk about a rebate from each one of those state agency budgets to pay for helping us suppress and not have these wildfires, which, for all the efforts that each one of these budgets might put into trying to lower the footprint, if we just didn't have those wildfires that caused all of our people to leave the state during those horrific wildfire crises, and all the people who lose their homes during those wildfire crises, and all the people who lose their kids during those wildfire crises, I mean, we might just have a better state.
maybe? Yeah, I think so. I think that, forest management is obviously a key component to wildfire, but in the legislature, the goal is all you can do is, but it's intended. Now, intended, our bills are supposed to intend to be single subject. They're intended to be focused on one thing at a time. And I think forest management policy is the long-term fix to wildfires. So I would agree. It's actually the long-term fix to our salmon issues. It's a long-term fix to our increasing temperatures in our creeks and riverbeds and our water issues. Like, it's all kind of tied to really forest management on some level. So we'll see. We'll get there. That one for another day on forest management.
Comments, okay.
Reagan, what about?
All right, so
let's move on.
The legislative calendar is just completely crazy because we skip straight over 4th of July. We completely ignore Thanksgiving and go straight to Christmas with the Christmas tree bill. And that is what we did today. It was Christmas in the legislature, man. And so I want to teach people how to do this because I think this is really fun and fascinating. And if you're not in the legislative process day to day, it's kind of hard to trace. House Bill 5006. So the bill that is designated for these last couple of years, last couple sessions to fund emergency board also has all of the end of session Christmas tree project funding in it. And so it's House Bill 5006, the -1 amendment, and go into under like the attachments on that bill. There's an index of sections, and it's like a little PDF spreadsheet that they make section by section showing what agency got what funding or which agency it's being routed through, what the funds are for, and what type of fund they use to fund that item. And so when you pull that up, you see, I'm just going to scroll to like a random one, and we're going to see that, Oregon Public Broadcasting got $229,000 of general fund. And, I reached out to our good friend Dirk Vanderhart. He says that's for infrastructure for emergency alert system, and that their CEO testified to that in general government. So, 2 more years of state-sponsored media, very exciting stuff. We're paying for, there's all kinds of stuff in here. But Brian, I don't know if you do the same thing that I do, but one of the funniest things I think in here is when you get to a section like this, Section 9 was deleted. Subsequent sections were not renumbered. And whenever I see that, I go, all right, who made a mistake and got their project cut right out of the bill? That's what I think. So who knows why, but I always wonder about that.
I would pay money to see the stuff that got deleted there in the final days of that Christmas tree bill. Because regardless of the projects, because there was a Senator Fred Gerard reminded us many times today, 2 billion or so requests that come in, and they funded 600 some odd million or something like that. I don't know the final number on all of it, but regardless, the stuff that got cut is almost more fun that was in there and then somehow didn't make the final cut, because everything gets jammed in there and then there's the final cut. So
yeah,
and that's done exclusively by the co-chairs. Like this is the one part of the process that isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Knopp, you know this better than I, and there's obviously Leader Breese Iverson. Well, you guys are there. You know, this is one part of the process as leadership, like the presiding officers really don't have final say of that document. Am I correct? It's the co-chairs.
It is the co-chairs. It's
Kind of,
it's
or
it's
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean, I would think that the Senate President and the House Speaker have input into that document as well, of course. But
input, yes, but final cut.
But it's always interesting how big the document is to how small the document gets.
yep, it's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I would say you've seen a couple of those big documents, haven't you, Senator?
Oh, I certainly have, and I would just say that things are a lot different in the current leadership than they were when we had Senate President Peter Courtney for 20 years, and we had House Speaker Tina Kotek for roughly 10 years. And there was a lot more continuity to those documents. And I think people are trying to find their way in leadership right now with these documents. And so I think this year's version is going to be really interesting. And for those people who don't understand why we're talking about a Christmas tree, it's basically gifts or ornaments that are being given out in the form of cash to districts who, let's say, quote, need things. And
Well, they need them. It's just,
yeah, I mean, we all wanted things, you know. Many years I worked on OSU Cascades campus and getting different elements of that funded, and sometimes those happened in these session-ending bills, and I was able to get money for drug endangered children, training for people to recognize what's going on with kids and drugs and things like that. And so there's all types of opportunities for good spending to happen, and then wasteful and unnecessary spending that happens in these documents as well.
it's always interesting to me, and I just want to throw this out there that when we get to the end of the session and there's this big, and I referred to it as the big list and the little list, but when you look at that big list and those that have had the opportunity to maybe peruse it, because we don't get us wrong, we don't get the opportunity to really dig into it. We get a like 5-minute preview of the list before it gets whisked away. But the quick perusal of that, there's things in that document I as a representative representing a certain district had never seen prior to looking at that list that were part of my district. And I always think it's interesting that we don't actually have a set process that is specific to a representative or a senator for where some of those ornaments, quote, on the tree come from. And I think that depending on, communities and commissioners and whatever nonprofit that understands this system of how the Ways and Means process works, those guys can make those requests unbeknownst to an actual elected official, and it actually becomes a conversation in the ornaments on the tree.
Yeah, you're right, Representative. And this is the best kept secret in Salem at the Capitol until it's unleashed, usually about 3 days before the session ends. And nobody, literally no one but the co-chairs, and sometimes even them, don't even know what's actually in it until it hits the subcommittee and then the full Ways and Means Committee, which I think happened today, didn't it?
Yeah.
It
Because
did.
did we get it yesterday, Brian? Monday?
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt and give a small shout out to our co-chairs this year, because I do think that they are trying to change the environment inside of how this process works in a space where at least we know what's out there. It's not perfect yet, by all means, but I do think that there's a little bit more transparency that's attempting to be had in that process, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope that we can continue down that road. So sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to put that out there, that I do think that there's a little bit of a different feel this session in some of that. It is by no means perfect yet, but at least
Yeah.
there was a little more transparency in it.
I think people forget too that we're just humans in this building working together. And I'd also think that part of being included in that bill and having more conversations is the relationships you have with the people in the building and the conversations that you're having. And also are your people in your district coming up and being in front of all these people and making the appointments and doing all the things that need to happen? I mean, I think that there's this sense that we're some super crazy intelligent people up here or something that are different from the regular average citizen, and we're not. We're just here trying to do the best we can do in our district. And I think that bill is a reflection of some random projects, but also really hard work from constituents in districts and relationships in buildings. So just trying to humanize it a little bit. And
So then explain to me, what was the pork that you got in this Christmas tree? Representative? Sorry, we're ornaments here. Pork is DC. That's the
Hey, they raise fat hogs down in Klamath County.
We had some people that came up more times than I can count and put way more time and energy into their capital construction request. And it's one that I'm like, we actually did need.
What is it though? I mean, just give us an example. I think
it's $10 million. It was shared between a Senate and two representative districts. So it was our main big ask for a wastewater treatment upgrade.
Kind of important. It is a wastewater treatment upgrade, and traditionally communities can't afford the kind of dollars it takes to actually upgrade it where it needs to go for future development, which the senator and I totally appreciate, building more houses.
And the wastewater treatment conversation is a whole other conversation, but they worked their tails off to get that. And it was a big deal.
Anybody else have any other line items or like major things that are funded that people should pay attention to? One of my favorite line items here that I'm going to have to email LFO and ask about is the Housing Infrastructure Fund in Section 157 getting $1. That's funny, man. We'll sweep the interest off that. We'll get a nickel.
Yeah, there's a couple weird ones in there. Yeah, it was a B-17. There was some
for Lacey Lady or Lady Lady.
That was a museum that totally
on a gas station or something.
Kind of, but if you read the history behind the Lacey Lady, I mean, it is
Lacey Lady,
moving and intriguing historical conversation.
The originator sounds like a real character.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
There's some
was up till about 10 o'clock last night, just figuring it out.
Just talking about it.
Look forward to Reagan and I breaking down Christmas tree bill over the summer because we'll be bored with content, so we're probably going to pull some fun stuff out.
Just so you guys know, we are exactly 6 months away from Christmas Eve, so very appropriate.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
A weekly podcast covering each section of the Christmas tree bill.
Right, how many weeks away are we? We could do the countdown.
Oh, you're funny. All right, one more topic I want to hit on before we pack up and head out of here for session.
Well, pack up.
So, yes.
Okay, go home. I'm in.
That's the goal. Campaign finance looks like, just to kind of kick forward, it looks like OPB wrote an article, put it in the show notes. Dirk thinks he's breaking news. He's running around the Capitol with his microphone trying to get things. So he puts out a little article. Looks like campaign finance. They want tomorrow morning in rules. It's supposed to come out
8 o'clock in the morning. Go watch.
They want to kick it out basically. Well, they'd probably rather kick it out forever. I think, but the reality is you've kicked the can down the road. And I think this one plays interesting that there was a bargain between both in the short session last year. So in 24, Senator, you know about this. There was a bargain basically in unions and I'd say OBI was kind of engaged in it a lot in the caucuses on, there was this weird, we're going to go to a ballot measure to basically create this crazy campaign finance law that would really strip things down. So everybody said, well, let's come together and put together a campaign finance law. I didn't really like it. I think it hamstrung the caucuses a lot. I think it gave more value to the unions. I think it gave more benefit to third-party PACs, other things. I think our campaign finance laws are the best we have because it's transparent. But it sounds like they agreed to it then, we passed it, and then like all good bills, why implement it when you can just kick it down the road? And it looks like that's what we're doing. Is that what you guys are hearing on our end of it?
I'd kick it down the road to 2031.
2031. Yeah.
31.
Why would we
two
do that?
governor
What happens
races
between now and
or
then?
one governor's race, two governor's races, and two state seats.
3 state representative seats.
Well, state like treasurer,
Yeah.
Statewide.
So
statewide.
pretty much 3 more elections.
Yeah.
3 more general elections. I don't know. Senator, do you have a take on the kicking the campaign finance thing? Is that a bad thing, good thing? Do you just let it go? And
So this is, well, here, let me read one real quote from Secretary of State Tobias Reed, because he's the guy who has to.
Senator Reagan, yeah, whatever.
I'm going to give some context here because people need
Get
some
your
context.
elbows out,
okay?
Senator. Get out the way of the mic and take over.
But the law has been tricky to implement, according to Secretary of State Tobias Reed. He says, quote, while we will move forward as directed, the law in its present form will create a system that is not only difficult to enforce, but potentially inaccessible to the very Oregonians it aims to serve. He said that ambiguities, goodness, I can't talk, and structural challenges within the law are going to create some chaos without intervention from the legislature. So, how should they intervene? Does this make sense?
I didn't hear a lot of talk about campaign finance this session. So it's interesting that we're at the 11th hour here, and it looks like that will get kicked down the road. But I would just remind people that the ballot measure that has gotten the most votes from Oregonians, most yes votes in the history of our state, is campaign finance reform. And it was my ballot measure referral that made the ballot. And so I would just caution people that if you're going to play games with this, you probably shouldn't, because Oregonians care about this policy. I would also say, just working this in, that term limits is the other most popular policy issue that has not been passed and implemented and should be. So you got campaign finance and term limits would make our state government and our federal government so much better.
Look at that. Good job getting a plug in for you, Mr. Co-Chair. Term limits.
Wait. Have we never had term limits in Oregon? I'm asking for a friend.
We did have term limits in 1990. Well, let's see, when did they pass? They probably 96, because they were coming up in 2002, in the summer of 2002, I believe it was. They were thrown out by the Supreme Court. But the reason they were thrown out, to me, was a little bit ridiculous, because they used the single subject factor, and they said that congressional term limits is different than state term limits. And I would suggest that the single subject was in fact term limits. So I think they both would have been upheld had the court not played games the same that they played games with the language of the ballot measure that barred legislators with more than 10 unexcused absences from running, because they didn't actually read the words on the page. They decided to go ahead and play politics with it. And I think that's the case with both of those. Politics was played by the court, and they shouldn't.
Yep. I think. Go ahead, Reagan.
It reminds me of, I just saw an article the other day that Supreme Court Jackson, one of the newest Supreme Court justices, was talking about how she doesn't agree with the majority of the court because they, adhere to strict textualism. And I was like, oh man, she'd really enjoy the Oregon Supreme Court, where we don't do that at all. We don't look at the textualism. We just look at intent. Brian, I got to read you this too from Dan Meek, because he was the guy who pushed this thing. And so obviously Dirk reaches out, or maybe this is Lauren, for a quote. Is Oregon government so incompetent that it can't manage it, even when already given 3 years to prepare for contribution limits and 4 years to prepare for the disclosure limits? He wrote in an email. Yes, Dan, that is correct. Oregon is so incompetent. We cannot manage to do any of those things in any reasonable timeline. Congratulations. You have now discovered what most Oregonians discover the hard way is that, yes, our government tends to not be very good at setting up new systems or doing anything related to computers.
Can I just say though on that, not to defend us at all, because it's really been our legislature that has chosen to not invest in upgrading our system, but our
Very
system
true.
is so out of date that to actually implement any of this, I don't even think it has the capacity to do it. So until our legislature wants to actually make updating our systems a priority, I don't know how they're going to make that happen. And the cost to the Secretary of State's office to upgrade and update all of their IT systems and software and all the things that looks like, 2031 is probably also a bit of a dream. So yeah.
We need the bill to switch the legislature over to just exclusively Apple products. That'll fix it. All the government, Apple products.
I'm on board. I would say, I think Rep. McIntire made a really good point, and so did Senator Knopp. Here's two things on this one. One, people, Oregonians, and most general voters, I think Americans, they'll vote for what they perceive to be good government bills. So a ballot measure that has a feeling that it has good government, campaign finance reform, term limits, that sounds good to them. So those ballot measures already start out at a high bar to defeat. So, and then the other thing that you said is the reality is also taxpayers don't want to invest in anything that upgrades government services. So you're really at a really tough thing. If you came out and said, oh, we want to spend $1 billion to upgrade our entire systems within state government, people would be up in arms because they wouldn't want to pay the money. So it really is a funny juxtaposition of the two, where people want good government, yet they don't really like to pay for it.
Well, I think that's a whole conversation back even to the CapCon list, right?
Yeah.
Like the budget, the Christmas tree is, and it was said by another colleague, it's a moral document, right? And so if the legislature wanted to invest in infrastructure and upgrading and doing things that would make everything in Oregon function better, it would keep your fees down, it would do all of those things that would benefit Oregonians, we certainly could. But instead, we
make choices.
Bridge. Well, we need bridges too. We want our baseball field. We don't have any baseball fields this time on the CapCon list, but
Aquatic centers,
we want
those are great.
I mean, so
You don't have any baseball fields on there because they've already been funded.
well, and they didn't follow through. So there's
800
also
million.
that. There's also that.
I call it the field of in your dreams. There's no way.
Well,
come
and
in here.
we're talking about this is taking a different thing, but we had a bill up today, 5016, and we had big debate on the floor. There was a lot of legislative support to add in a full-time LA2 to the legislative staff, and it was $16 million, I believe, and it didn't get funded. And boy, you had people real upset on the floor on both sides of the aisle. Of course, the budget still passed, but there's a lot of conversation. So
Do you think more Republicans would have voted against funding for the professional baseball field if they knew that the name for that new team was going to be the Portland Progressives?
Leave it to the senator to have
That's
the
a good one.
Love it.
Well, appreciate everybody today. It's getting late, and we've still got to finish up this legislative session and then saddle up our elephants and our donkeys and head back to our districts for a good long break. Appreciate all of you guys for being here tonight. And Brian, we can do next time we come together, hopefully we will be signing done with this session.
Please be signing done. I'm good for that.
Is that Latin or is that?
I'm sure that's a Greek term that just Reagan knows.
It's called piglet.
I think that was a geek term, not a
Reagan geek term.
Thank you, everybody.
Sitting on the Senate floor. and senators meet, trading words to find the perfect beat. Committee hearings all day long, till we finally sing the same song. Oh, yeah. Amendments flying high, watch them pass on by. Gotta give and try, make this bill fly. We're dancing back and forth on the Senate floor. La la la, yeah, yeah. Moving bills through an open door, round and round until we score. This is what we came here for. Dancing on the Senate floor. When the votes align, and the count is right. Feel that Oregon pride, as we pass it tonight. We're dancing